Joe Rogan and Konstantin Kisin weighed in on the wrongful deportation of a Venezuelan migrant who was sent to a maximum security prison in El Salvador, with ICE claiming that he was a member of Tren de Aragua. However, it appears that is not the case. In fact, he wasn't even in the United States illegally. He was here legally. He had a legitimate asylum claim. He came in through a port of entry and made that asylum claim. And his name's Andrei Hernandez. He's a gay makeup artist who's been—
All right, folks, buckle up, because we've got one of the strangest immigration stories you've never heard, and it's setting the internet on fire. Joe Rogan, yes, that Joe Rogan, and Anna Kasparian from the Young Turks actually agreed on something. And not just anything. They both just demolished Trump's immigration policies in a way that should make every American pause and pay notice. We're talking about a lawful asylum applicant, a Venezuelan gay makeup artist called Andrei Hernandez, who was deported wrongfully by the Trump administration and placed in a maximum security prison in El Salvador. Why? Because ICE believed his mom and dad tattoos with crowns were gang-related? You can't make this stuff up. And if that doesn't seem awful enough, it gets worse. There was no trial, no hearing, no due process, just boom, you're gone. For doing absolutely nothing wrong, they were sent to a hellhole filled of dangerous criminals. Politics is no longer the issue here. This concerns the blatant misuse of authority. It concerns what occurs when a government entity functions as a jury, judge, and executioner without any accountability. This is where things start to become very interesting, though. It was pointed out by Joe Rogan. Another center-right speaker, Konstantin Kisin, described it as absurd. What about Anna Kasparian? She didn't mince words. She established what may be the most drastic repeal of this deportation program to date. Today's video will explain the specifics of this unlawful deportation, why Rogan and Kasparian's odd partnership could be a game-changer in the immigration debate, and what this means for Trump's strategy for 2024. Stay put. The MAGA base will be shaken, the brosphere will be shaken, and a side of the Trump-era immigration machine that you were never supposed to see will be revealed.
You gotta get scared that people who are not criminals are getting, lassoed up and deported and sent to, El Salvador prisons.
With a bunch of these Tren de Aragua guys, allegedly they got at least one guy who wasn't a criminal, who was just a gay barber who I think, according to the story, came here legally. He was here legally. That's what they said.
Joe Rogan and Konstantin Kisin weighed in on the wrongful deportation of a Venezuelan migrant who was sent to a maximum security prison in El Salvador, with ICE claiming that he was a member of Tren de Aragua. However, it appears that is not the case. In fact, he wasn't even in the United States illegally. He was here legally. He had a legitimate asylum claim. He came in through a port of entry and made that asylum claim. And his name's Andrei Hernandez. He's a gay makeup artist who's been an outspoken critic of Venezuela. And I just feel like it's pretty obvious he's not a Tren de Aragua gang member.
Yeah, they don't even allow gay people into the gang. So among 1,000 reasons why he's not a gang member. So this is what happens when you don't do due process.
Exactly.
Because the courts are supposed to check. Is he a gang member or isn't he? Is he undocumented or isn't he? Did he come here legally or not? Because if you don't check, you get people who did come here legally and that aren't in a gang. And that's why if he did this without doing it in a dumb way, and he just rounded up the actual gang and made sure, then shipped them off, some people would still be mad that he's sending them to a hellhole in El Salvador. But overall, the American people would be massively on his side.
Yeah, and look, I want to be 100% clear. Everyone, including individuals who are suspected of being gang members, and there's actual evidence, showing that they're part, doesn't matter. You need to go through the proper channels. There needs to be due process. There's a reason why due process exists. And if you think it's okay to just throw it away when it comes to individuals who the federal government is simply accusing unilaterally of doing something criminal, well, you're really allowing so much power to be concentrated in the federal government to the point where they can accuse anyone of anything. and you don't get your day in court. That's crazy. That is absolutely insane.
Joined by British analyst Konstantin Kisin and Tights Anna Kasparian, Joe Rogan offered his insights on a case that should freeze anyone who still believes in due process and civil rights in a riveting and quite frightening discussion. Andres Hernandez, a Venezuelan immigrant who had done everything correctly, was the topic. He made a valid asylum application, sought protection from political persecution, and lawfully entered the country at an authorized port of entry. Based on tattoos that ICE officials thought were gang emblems, he was taken from U.S. soil and placed in a maximum security prison in El Salvador, an institution that houses terrorists and hardened criminals without being given the fair trial. He was entitled to under U.S. and international law. The individual has openly criticized the Venezuelan government and is a gay cosmetics artist. ICE accused him of joining Itrao de Araguay, but there is no proof that he was ever a member of the gang. The alleged tattoos of the gang, parents beneath a pair of crowns, and there was the only evidence. You're right if this sounds like Kafka wearing a MAGA hat. Who is speaking up is more remarkable. Neither Konstantin Kisin nor Joe Rogan are particularly left-wing. In actuality, Rogan is frequently described as a representative of the brothsphere or the populist right, whether this is accurate or not. On cultural topics like trans athletes, Kisin has publicly disagreed with progressive pundits like Anna Kasparian. But in this instance, both men ended up raising the alarm. The expulsion was described as horrifying, evil, and un-American. In particular, Kisin drew attention to the corrupt incentive systems in government bureaucracy, how the political impulse is to conceal a wrongful deportation rather than acknowledge its mistake. Rogan underlined the ridiculousness of sending a lawfully present immigrant to a foreign jail without any prior notice, trial, or means of self-defense. They both made it apparent that the issue is not just the deportation of the guilty, but also the sweeping up of the innocent in the name of law and order.
He had sought asylum in the United States through a port of entry, but the Trump administration argues that he's part of Tren de Aragua because he has gang tattoos. Oh, interesting. So, they make the claim. I want to see the gang tattoos. Maybe they have a legitimate argument here. Here's what the tattoos look like. Here are the tattoos that ICE declared were evidence that, this guy, gay makeup artist who came to a port of entry seeking asylum from Venezuela, was a member of a vicious gang. I'm not making this up. This is it. Mom and dad with crowns over them. Those are not gang tattoos. But apparently it didn't matter because despite the fact that it's obvious those aren't gang tattoos, his lawyers have not been able to reach him since March 15th. And after interviewing him, he says he is not a member of the gang. Somehow an ICE officer concludes that despite all that, his 2 crown tattoos and mom and dad written under them are consistent with those of a Tren de Aragua member.
No, they're not.
No, they're not. They're just lying. So with that context in mind, and knowing that this is what Rogan and Kisin are talking about, let's hear more of what they had to say.
I think a human being being plucked out of nowhere and ending up in a country he's never been in a maximum security prison with gang members, seems like a bad thing to happen to me.
It's horrific. It's horrific.
I don't think that should be controversial.
No, that's not controversial at all. And this is the thing, measured twice, cut once.
Yeah.
This is kind of crazy that could be possible. That's horrific. And that's bad for the cause. Like, the cause is, let's get the gang members out. Everybody agrees. But let's not innocent gay hairdressers get lumped up with the gangs. And then, how long before that guy can get out? Can we figure out how to get him out? Is there any plan in place to alert the authorities that they've made a horrible mistake and correct it?
Well, if you think about it from a government perspective, and this is where I think it gets quite sinister, is once you've done that, the incentive structure is never going to be to admit that and deal with it. The incentive structure is to say nothing, to cover it up, to pretend it didn't happen. Right?
That is horrible.
So someone ends up in a black hole. But we've seen it. We've seen it in every country, including in America.
But that's the thing about politics, right? Never admit your fault. Never admit you're wrong.
It's so dumb.
And this is the thing we're seeing with the signal thing, and this is the thing we're seeing with this.
And, there seems to be more frustration with the lack of accountability or the willingness to take responsibility for mistakes made. So far, we haven't heard anything from the Trump administration in regard to this specific individual who was sent away. But you should know that we have so far spent about $40 million to send migrants to El Salvador's CCOT. And that's according to the State Department. They apparently did an analysis and provided that analysis to senators. There was a delegation of 5 senators who even visited. I'm sorry, that's for Gitmo. So we've spent $40 million to jail 400 migrants at Guantanamo Bay. So it's not just El Salvador. We're also sending them to Guantanamo Bay. But that has become so expensive that the Trump administration quietly stopped doing that. And they actually sent about half of those 400 migrants back to the United States because of how costly it was. But I should also note that we've been paying El Salvador as well. The last time it was reported, we spent about $6 million to send migrants there.
Legal challenges were raised by Kasparian against the Trump administration's practice of deporting migrants to third countries without judicial review. U.S. District Judge Brian Murphy's recent ruling temporarily halted this practice, reaffirming that no immigrant should be deported without written notice and a chance to seek protection under the 1994 U.S.-approved Convention Against Torture. This decision counters attempts to circumvent due process and highlights a fundamental American democratic principle: the right to be heard before state action. The financial implications are staggering, with over $6 million spent on deportations to El Salvador and $40 million on Guantanamo Bay, where some wrongly deported migrants were eventually returned to the U.S. This situation should concern all Americans, transcending political divides, as it questions our commitment to civil liberties and due process. It's a call to demand justice and ensure such abuses never recur. If you find this issue important, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Stay vigilant and informed.